Good evening, everyone. In this video, we are going to solve a Big Book RC passage from the scratch. So I've been receiving a lot of requests to basically, solve a passage live so that you can watch my approach to solving the RC questions. Now, RC solving is something that is, it's not really difficult, but it takes a few tips and tricks to basically solve the passage in the proper way, so that you can optimize on solving, so that you can get maximum score out of the minimum time possible. Okay, so let's start solving the passage with me. I'm Smriti Tiwari, founder of AptiWizard. I'm a GRE GMAT verbal aptitude trainer since the last 11 years. So yes, you can come to me for all your verbal aptitude related queries for GRE or GMAT. You can check out my services on my website, www.aptiwizard.com. We also provide at AptiWizard AWA review service and SOP writing for all the programs like NMS and NMIM or APHD. So you can just check out everything on the website. Okay, so we have posted this passage on animal signals on the page. And I hope you guys have, read the passage once and tried to approach it from your side once. So here we are going to, first go through the passage slowly, so that just in case people have not really, went through the passage, it would be easier. Plus, because you can also, watch how I break down the passage and try to focus on the points that are important in the passage and kind of skim through what's not so important, and then how we should approach the questions. Okay. So let's start with the passage, and let's just try to highlight the important points here. So the passage talks about animal signals, and the author starts by saying animal signals such as the complex songs of birds tend to be costly. Okay. So the author is talking about animal signals and specifically the complex songs of birds, for example, and he's saying that these animal signals tend to be costly. Now, costly in terms of what is an obvious question. So I should expect that this is something that is going to be answered in the coming sentences. Okay. So let's look at the second sentence. A bird, by singing, may forfeit time that could otherwise be spent on other important behaviors such as foraging or resting. Okay. Singing may also advertise an individual's location to rivals or predators and impair the ability to detect their approach. Okay. So the author basically mentioned to us that these animal signals tend to be costly. Okay. Now, costly in what sense? So he has mentioned two ways in which these animal signals can be costly to the birds. So one is that they may forfeit time that could otherwise be spent on other important activities. For example, they could be hunting, they could be feeding, resting, foraging, yeah. And the second way in which these animal signals tend to be costly is that they advertise the individual's location. So yeah, birds basically have a lot of predators looking out for them, right? So if they are singing, the predators will come to know that the birds are available at this particular location. So it's basically, the birds are really putting themselves at risk by singing. So that is also a cost. Okay. Then the author says, although, okay. So whenever I read such a transitional word, I basically need to read it very properly. So yeah, I need to focus on what is given ahead of this word. Okay. So here the sentence says, although these types of cost may be important, all right, discussions of the cost of singing have generally focused on energy costs. Okay. So the author is basically saying that although these type of costs may be important, so he has mentioned two types of costs till now, okay? But then he says that they may be important, but discussions of the cost have generally focused on energy costs. So energy costs is what he will be talking ahead in the passage, okay? All right. Now let's look at what he's telling us about the energy costs here. So let's start the second para. Overall, the evidence is equivocal. Which evidence? So what I understand from here is the first para ends with the word energy costs. And then the second para says overall the evidence is equivocal. So I understand from here is that the evidence about energy costs is what is equivocal. So equivocal means that something is unclear or vague. Okay. All right. So let's see how this evidence is equivocal and not really clear. For instance, while some scientists found increases in energy consumption, okay, during singing for some particular variety of birds, some other scientists found no effect of crowing on energy consumption in roosters. Okay. So one scientist found increase in energy consumption when a type of bird was singing, but another scientist did not find any such effect on energy consumption when the roosters were crowing. Okay, so that is why the author says that the evidence is equivocal. It is vague, it is unclear, right? If the evidence would have been in support of energy consumption, like, when the birds are singing, they are consuming more energy, okay? If this was the evidence from both these studies, from both these scientists, then the evidence would have been clear. But it is not so. One scientist found increases in energy consumption during singing. Another scientist did not find such an increase in energy consumption. So that is why the author is saying overall the evidence is equivocal. All right. Now let's move ahead. To obtain empirical data regarding the energy costs of singing, Thomas explained, okay, so there's another scientist that has come into picture here, Thomas. So the author says, two scientists have already tried their hands at this task, and now another scientist called Thomas, he is trying to do the same thing. He's trying to figure out the energy consumption when the birds are singing, right? So in order to obtain such empirical data regarding costs of energy, Thomas examined the relationship between song rate and overnight changes in body mass. Okay. So this is the testing that Thomas is basically doing, examining the relationship between song rate and changes in body mass. And why is this done? To obtain empirical data. All right. Let's look ahead. Birds store energy as fat deposits. Okay. Changes in these reserves can be reliably estimated by measuring changes in body mass. All right. So if you can just focus here, the author is basically saying that birds store energy as fat deposits, okay? And changes in these fat deposits can be estimated by measuring changes in body mass, okay? So storage of energy is related to body mass. All right. Now let's read ahead. If singing has important energy costs, nightingales should lose more body mass on nights when their song rate is high. Okay. So the sentence starts with the word if, and this is what the scientist Thomas is basically setting out to examine, right? So this is kind of his hypothesis. Okay. What is the hypothesis? If singing has important energy costs, nightingales should lose more body mass on nights when song rate is high. So basically, Thomas is saying that when the nightingales are singing more, they are using more energy. So this energy was the fat deposits, and fat deposits made up their body mass. So if they are singing more, their body mass will be lost more. Okay. Now let's read ahead. Thomas found that nightingales reached a significantly higher body mass at dusk and lost more mass overnight on nights when their song rate was high. Okay. So Thomas was really trying to study whether nightingales were losing more mass when they were, singing more. And he found that this was actually correct. So we can say that Thomas proved his hypothesis with his empirical data, with the tests that he did. Okay. So up till now, what the passage has basically discussed is that animal singing has its costs. There are a couple of type of costs, but then energy costs are the ones that scientists have been focusing on. And energy costs per se have been studied by a few scientists, but the evidence was unclear. So this particular scientist set out to measure the energy cost with respect to, body mass. And he found out that, yes, the more the birds sing, the more their body mass is lost. Okay, so now let's read ahead. The next para says, these results suggest that there may be several costs of singing at night associated with body reserves. Okay, so up till now, the second para basically was talking about the energy costs, right? But then third para starts with several costs. So the author has mentioned several costs here, means that there is not just the energy cost which is associated with body reserve or body mass, but the author is saying that there are several costs of singing at night associated with body reserves. Okay, so he's introducing more type of costs here, all right? So let's read ahead and see what type of cost he has included now. The increased metabolic cost. Okay, so metabolic cost is the new cost here. Okay. The increased metabolic cost of possessing higher body mass contributes to increased overnight mass loss. All right. The strategic regulation of evening body reserves is also likely to incur additional costs, as nightingales must spend more time foraging in order to build up larger body reserves. Okay. So essentially what the author is saying here is that, during the singing activity, okay, so nightingales sing at night, and during that activity of singing, there is some cost involved, right? They expend their energy in singing. But even besides that spending of energy, there are several other reasons why the energy gets spent, okay? And these are because of the metabolic costs. So this is basically that the nightingales would require a lot of energy in order to sing throughout the night. And in order to have that much energy, in order to store that much energy to sing in the night time, they would basically need to do other activities. For example, they will need to hunt more, they will need to search for more food, eat more food, and thereby store more energy so that they can later sing, right? Okay, so that is also a cost according to the author, because they're going to spend, the nightingales are going to spend their time in looking for food and eating it, right? Okay, now let's read ahead. The metabolic cost of singing itself may also contribute to increased loss of reserves. Okay. This metabolic cost may arise from muscular and neural activity involved in singing, or from behaviors associated with singing. Okay. So the author is now saying that metabolic cost does not just come by foraging activities, but more activities like some muscular and neural activities. For example, so here is where we understand what he's really talking about here. Birds may expend more of their reserves on thermoregulation if they spend the night exposed to the wind on a song post than if they are in a sheltered roost site. Okay. So what the author is saying here is that not just in looking for food in order to store more energy so that they can sing. In case the birds are singing, at a place where there's a lot of wind, or maybe it's a cold night, then they would need to thermoregulate their temperature just like humans also do. And therefore, they will expend more energy in the activity of thermoregulation. Okay. So that is also where the cost of singing lies for the nightingales. All right. Thomas's data therefore show, all right. So finally, we come to the word therefore in the passage. So these are the kind of words that we look for, And therefore basically means that there is something that is being summed up. And here the author is summing up Thomas's entire experiment. All right. So Thomas's data, therefore, show that whether or not singing per se has an important metabolic costs associated with singing can have an important measurable effect on a bird's daily energy budget, at least in birds with high song rates such as nightingales. All right. So the author has finally concluded by actually concluding what Thomas found out during his experiments. And the author is saying that Thomas's data finally shows that not just the metabolic cost, or even if the metabolic cost did not have an important contribution, the associated costs, associated costs of singing, like hunting for more food in order to sing, and thermoregulating the body temperature when you are singing out in a cold night or windy night. So all these associated costs can have an important measurable effect on a bird's daily energy budget, at least in high song rate birds like nightingale. All right. So this is what the passage was about. The author set out to discussing the costs involved in singing of certain type of birds, and then he discussed a few researches, and then he concluded along with the Thomas's conclusion that the associated costs of singing, apart from just the metabolic and energy cost, can have an important measurable effect on a bird's daily energy budget. Okay, so he was basically in this passage talking about the costs of animal singing, as he clearly set out in the first line of the passage. All right, let's look at the questions. So the first question is primary purpose. All right, now primary purpose of the passage basically means the reason why the passage was written by the author. Okay, so let's look at the options. Let's look at option A, compare the different types of cost involved. So is the author comparing different types of costs? Think about it. The author is basically just mentioning the different type of costs and then finding out whether those costs were applicable and how they were applicable in the case of different kind of birds, right? He was really comparing those costs, that which cost is more and which cost is less, right? No comparison here, and therefore you can tick off option A. Okay. All right. Let's look at option B. Question a hypothesis. So the only hypothesis that we basically saw in the passage was the one that Thomas put out. And is the author questioning that hypothesis regarding the energy costs of singing? No, right? He's not really questioning any hypothesis. Okay. So we move on to option C. Option C says, to present evidence suggesting that singing has an important energy cost for certain birds. So yes, this is exactly what we were basically looking for. Okay, this is what the author has basically done in the passage. He has presented evidence suggesting that singing has an important energy cost. So he talked about energy cost. He also talked about the metabolic cost and then associated costs. Okay. So these were all, then concluded, and then he concluded by saying that these costs are really there. Okay, let's just look at the last line. Metabolic costs associated with singing can have an important measurable effect on a bird's daily energy budget. Okay, it means that yes, singing has that energy expenditure, and therefore you can say that singing has an important energy cost for certain birds. So yes, this option is correct and we can mark it. We'll just also go through options D and E and try to eliminate them so that we can confidently mark option C. So D says, discuss the benefits provided to an organism by a behavior that is costly. No benefits are being talked about. Describe an experiment that supports an alternative model of how birdsong functions. All these words are incorrect. Nothing of this sort has been given in the passage. So we can tick off options D and E as well. And I think the only confusion here may be between these two options, options B and C. And option A, D, E, and E, you can easily eliminate. And between options B and C, the differentiating factor is the word hypothesis here. So the question and hypothesis is basically not done. There's only one hypothesis mentioned, which is by the scientist Thomas, and the author is not questioning his hypothesis. The author is actually agreeing to it. The author has concluded by saying that Thomas did find what he was looking for and he proved this hypothesis. Okay, so option B is opposite to what the author said in the passage, and therefore option C we can tick confidently. Okay, let's look at the next question. The passage implies that during the day before a night on which a male nightingale's song rate is high, that nightingale probably does which of the following? Okay, so the question is asking, when the song rate is high, before that night, what has this nightingale done? So according to what we have understood from the passage, in order to sing more, the nightingales need to conserve more energy, and in order to conserve to hoard that energy, they need to forage more, they need to eat more, hunt more, right? So therefore we can directly tick which option stores more energy as body reserves than on other days. Yes, this is correct. Simple question actually. Let's look at the other options as well. Option A says, expends less of its reserves on thermoregulation than on other days. So thermoregulation was talked about like just in case, right? So in case the bird is actually in a windy or cold environment, then the bird would spend more energy on thermoregulation than on other days. But they're not saying that when the song rate is high before that night, what would the nightingale do, right? The thermoregulation would be done during the act of singing, not at a time beforehand, yeah? So that is why A is incorrect. And look at C, hides to avoid predators. No, actually the singing activity exposes that bird to more risk. Yeah, it is more visible and audible as well to the predators. Okay, so C is also incorrect. So question 2 will only mark B. All right. Okay. Let's look at the next question. Select the sentence in the first or second paragraph that presents empirical results in support of a hypothesis about the energy cost of singing. Yeah, we know which hypothesis this is. This was the hypothesis that Thomas put out. So we need the sentence that presents empirical results in support of this hypothesis. So let's look at where Thomas's hypothesis was mentioned. Yeah, so this was the hypothesis. If singing has important energy costs, nightingales should lose more body mass when their song rate is high. And this is the sentence. Thomas found that nightingales reached a significantly higher body mass at dusk and lost. So this is the empirical evidence, okay, that supported Thomas's hypothesis. So this is what we will mark as the correct sentence, okay. All right, let's look at the next question, the last question. Question 4. It can be inferred from the passage that compared with other costs of singing, which of the following is true of the energy costs of singing? Okay, so the author has not really compared the energy costs with the other costs, saying which is more, which is less, yeah? But what can be inferred from the passage? Let's go through the options. Option A, they are the single greatest cost to an individual bird. Now, which cost is great, which is not great, has not been talked about in the passage. So you can basically tick this off. Let's look at B. They have generally received more attention from the scientists. Yeah, this was correct. Let's look at the para where this was said. This was basically said in the first para. Yeah, last line of the first para. Although these costs may be more important, discussions of the cost of singing have generally focused on energy costs. Okay, so there are different type of costs, but discussion has focused on the energy cost. Okay, so question 4 we can mark B. They have generally received more attention from scientists. All right, they have received more focus, more attention. Let's still look at C because we always want to look at all the options, all right? Especially when the question has 3 options, because this is select all that apply kind of question. So here, if 2 options are correct, we can select 2. And there may be a possibility that A, B, and C both can be correct also. All 3 can be correct also. So we need to check all the options in these questions especially. So the options he says, they vary less from one bird species to another. Okay, so we can tick this off because there is no comparison of one bird species to another in the passage. Okay, so this is how we solve all these 4 questions from this particular passage. And this was a medium difficulty level passage, all right, not very difficult. And for starters, we wanted to take this passage up because this was requested by one of the students, and for starting it made a good passage to discuss. But as we move on with our Facebook Live classes, I would want to pick up more difficult questions in RC passages as well, plus other type of questions. So in case you have any requests in terms of, the particular passage that you would want me to discuss, or maybe the different question types, whatever, just shoot the request out to me, and I'll take it up in the next Facebook Live class. I plan to take up more such live classes, on a weekly basis. And in order to be updated about such classes in future, do like my page AptiWizard on Facebook. All right. So you'll be updated about everything that is going on with respect to GRE, GMA, and verbal aptitude. You'll be updated with all the latest notifications. Plus, you'll be updated about all the latest blog posts that I'm writing and all the live videos that I'm doing. Okay. So we're wrapping it up. Thank you for watching. I hope you have had good learning with this video. Have a good day.